Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome again to my YouTube channel. For today's episode, I want us to learn about Luo language. I want us to learn about Luo language, and today I want us to see how we call domestic animals or the animals in Luo. So, if you aren't a Luo, this is a best study program for you. Let's start with domestic animals first. How do we call a hen in Luo? A hen, we call it gueno. Gueno. That's a hen, gueno. A cock. A cock is called thuon. A cock. Thuon. Thuon. A cock. Now let's go to a cat. Cat. Cat, we call it please don't it is not vulgar. It's not vulgar. We call it pussy. A cat, we call it pussy. Pussy. That's a cat for us. Pussy. A dog, we call it guok. A dog, guok. Guok. That's a dog. Cow, we call a cow dhiang. Dhiang. That's a cow. Dhiang. Donkey, how do we call a donkey? Donkey, we call ponda. Donkey, we call ponda. How do we call zebra? How do we call a zebra? That is in Luo. A zebra, we call it maguar. 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 How do we call a horse? A horse, we call faras. A horse, we call it faras. Faras. What of the sheep? A sheep, we call it rombo. We call sheep rombo. Rombo. Which one again is remaining? Which other domestic animal is remaining? Which one is remaining? Which one? Okay, let's go to other animals now, not now domestic. Hyena. Hyena, we call it ondiek. 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 That's hyena. Ondiek. We call hyena ondiek. How do we call baboon? Baboon, we call beam. 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 That's baboon. Monkey. How do we call monkey? We call monkey onger. 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 Wildcat. How do we call a wildcat? Wildcat, we call ogwang. 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 There are two main types of ogwang or wildcat. One, we call it ogwang angem. One, we call it ogwang angemo. How does ogwang angemo look? Ogwang angemo, when it wants to catch a hen, at the buttocks of Ogwangangemo. At the buttocks of Ogwangangemo. At the buttocks of Ogwangangemo. There are seed-like structures at the buttock of Ogwangangemo. There are things like seeds, seeds of maize. There's are things like seeds of maize. So when it wants to catch a hen, it opens the buttocks so that a hen will confuse that buttock to be a maize or to be maize. So when a hen goes to peck or to pick those seed-like structures, Ogwangangemo will close will close the buttock. then the hen will be stuck inside. Then Ogwangangemo will drag the hen far away from the catching point and eat it far away. That's Ogwangangemo. There's also another type of a wild cat. We call it Ogwangiwari. Ogwangayuara. Ogwangiwari has a very long tail with very hairy tail. So for it Ogwangiwari, it means it drags. Yuari means drags. It has a long tail which drags behind it. So we call it Ogwangiwari. Then we have also Ogwangangemo. We also have a goat. How do we call a goat? Goat. A goat, we call it DL. A goat, we call it DL. Which one again? How do we call a snake? A snake in Luo, we call it Thuol. Thuol. That's a snake. Thuol. And there are different types of snakes, very many types of snakes. But I want us just get the basic. Yeah, so a snake is Thuol. Cooking stick. How do we call a cooking stick? We say Oluthkuon. Oluthkuon. But the Luos in Kenya are divided into two. There are those of the South Nyanza and those of the Central Nyanza. So the Central Nyanza are those who are from Siaya, mostly Siaya. So Siaya, they call it differently. For us, we call a cooking stick Oluthkuon. We, the South Nyanza people, Homa Bay, Migori, Kisumu, Sama, we call it Oluthkuon. But the Siaya people, the Luos of Siaya, call it Oliho. Oliho. Yeah, so we call it Oluthkuon. How do we call ugali? How do we call ugali? Ugali, we call it kuon. Ugali, we call kuon. Kuon. That is ugali. How do we call vegetable? How do we call vegetable? Vegetable, we call it a lot. A lot. You know, some people say that English originated from a Luo language. So I may not know. So look at how we call vegetable, a lot. But in English, a lot is something. You know it, a lot. So for us, we call vegetable a lot. Let us go to bicycle. How do we call a bicycle? Bicycle, we say ndega. 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 That's bicycle. Ndega. Ndega. Bicycle. How do we call A vehicle. A vehicle. How do we call a vehicle? We call a vehicle mtoka. 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 Or we can also call it nyamburko. 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 That is a vehicle. How do we call a tree? A tree, we call it yen. A tree, yen. 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 That's a tree. Which one again? Okay. A house. How do we call a house? We call it ot. 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 How do we call a mountain? A mountain we say got. 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 How do we call a river? A river we call it aora. 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 How do we call a boy child? Boy child. A boy. We say woi. 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 How do we call a girl? A girl we say nyako. 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 How do we call a child? A child. A child we say nyathe. Nyathe. That is, Luos of South Nyanza call it nyathe. But Luos of Central Nyanza, that is Siaya, they say mihia. Mihia. But for us, Luos of South Nyanza, we say nyako. Nyathe. Nyathe. How do we call maize? Maize. Maize say bando. 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 How do we call a garden? A garden. We say puodo. 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 Which one again is remaining? Let me recall some. How do we call a shoe? Shoes. We say woche. 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 How do we call clothes? Clothes. Clothes we say leuni. If there are many, leuni clothes, leuni. If it is one, we say lao. Lao. If it is one, we say lao. Lao. How do we call food? Food. Food we say chiemo. 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 How do we call kanisa? How do we call church? How do we call a church? Church we say kanisa. 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 How do we call a father? A father we say baba. 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 How do we call a mother? We say mama. Mama. How do we call a grandfather? A grandfather we say jaduong. Jaduong. A grandfather we say kwaru. Kwara. Kwaru or kwara. Those ones. How do we call an elderly man? Jaduong. An elderly man we say jaduong. Jaduong. An elderly woman we say dayo. 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 Then how do we call How do our grandparents call their grandchildren? How do grandparents call grandchildren? Grandchildren in Luo, they are called nyikwayo. 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 What of great grandchildren? We say ndokloonda. Ndokloonda. We say ndokloonda. What of the great grandchildren? We say mieny. 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 What of the great grandchildren? We say ndokluchini. Ndokluchini. How do we call a first wife? For example, let's assume I have 3 wives. How do I call my first wife? I call my first wife Mikae. 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 How do we call second wife? Second wife we call Nyachira. 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 Third wife we call Rero. 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 How do we call phone? Phone. Phone. Young Luos will call a phone simu. Simu. Simu ama sime. Simu ama sime. Simu or sime. But what of those old people? They call it ongweamo. 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 How do we call a TV? Television. How do we call a television? We call it Wangjowi. 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 Which one again? How do we call a university? University. University we call it Mbalariany. 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 Me I call it Witatsomo. Me I call it Witatsomo or Osuchsomo. Me I call it Osuchsomo or Witatsomo, but we call it Mbalariany. Mbalariany. How do we call a leader of the Luo community? We call it Ker. 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 How do we call a black ant? Black ant we say Morne. 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 How do we call bananas? Bananas we say Rabolo. 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 How do we call sweet potato? Sweet potatoes we say Rabuon. 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 How do we call Irish potato or English potato? We say Waru. 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 How do we call a rat? A rat we say Oyeyo. 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 How do we call a broom? A broom we say UH. 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 How do we call water? Water we call it P. Water we say P. How do we call soil? Soil we say low, low or low, low. What of the Bible? The Bible we call it Moma, Moma, Moma. Bible we call it Moma. Until next time, if you haven't subscribed, please take a chance, give it a subscription so that this message can be propagated far and wide. Thank you.